Okay, back to English now. This session commemorates the 50th anniversary of the launch of cooperation between ASEAN and Japan. So to commemorate this session, we have invited guests from Indonesia, Singapore, and Japan who were involved in relations with ASEAN and other Asian countries. Now, the world is currently seeing Russian invasion of Ukraine and a confrontation between the two superpowers, namely the United States and China. And at the same time, the world is seemingly becoming multipolar with the presence or the emergence of the countries of the so-called Global South. Now, going back 50 years, when ASEAN and Japan started its cooperation, the world was also in the midst of a major upheaval in world affairs. The Paris Peace Accords marked the basic withdrawal of U.S. troops from South Vietnam, and eventually Vietnam was unified by the socialist North Vietnam. Meanwhile, the Cold War between the U.S. and Russia, then the Soviet Union, was entering an era of détente. And China, which had been in the socialist bloc, were having a confrontation with the Soviets. And China and U.S. were rapidly improving their relations. It was a time of great change. Now, fast forward 50 years, we're also seeing a great change in the international order. So in this discussion, we would like to take up the topic of how ASEAN and Japan can move forward in this changing international order. Now, this session is held in cooperation with the University of Tsukuba, the National Graduate Institute for Policy Studies, GRIPS, and the Indonesian-based Foreign Policy Community of Indonesia, FPCI, which is a cooperation partner of GRIPS. Now, first, for our opening remarks, we would like to have Senior Fellow Yutaka Imura from GRIPS Alliance, the co-sponsor of the events. Ambassador Imura served as Japanese ambassador to Indonesia and also ambassador to France. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Fukushima-san. Distinguished members of the university, Dr. Dino Paticharan, panelists, and all of those present in the conference hall and participating online. Thank you for joining us today at the commemorative session celebrating 50th anniversary of Japan-ASEAN Friendship and Cooperation. I had the privilege of working closely with our main speaker, Dr. Dino Paticharan, particularly during his tenure as a diplomatic advisor to President Sushiro Bamban Hideno in the early 2000s. While I was serving as ambassador of Japan in Indonesia. Over the 20 years of my association with Dr. Dino Paticharan, I learned about the new think tank, which is Foreign Policy Community of Indonesia, FPCI, established by Dino-san, which has been bringing new perspective to the intellectual world of Southeast Asia. So we started to collaborate, to work together, and GRIPS has been happy to collaborate with FPCI. Especially, we appreciated its unique approach to offering young students in the Southeast Asia as a whole the opportunity to engage directly with policymakers and experts in Indonesia, as well as all the member countries of Southeast Asia and beyond, fostering mutual understanding of international issues. We have organized various international events like joint public forum on the issues related to ASEAN-Japan. All the conferences and workshops we have organized were broadcast online, like today, to our young friends across Southeast Asia, so that we can have a better mutual understanding of our respective policies on the challenges with which we are confronted. As Fukushima-san, Yuko Fukushima mentioned, we are actually witnessing significant global changes, probably the most profound since Second World War, with the COVID-19 pandemic and Russian invasion to Ukraine accelerating these shifts. One key change is the shifting of the relations between great powers, emergence of China as a superpower, and the resurgence of Russia's aggressive tendency, which paradoxically causes its own internal instability. Russia is now even hinting at the possibility of using nuclear weapons, probably due to the failure of its military operation in Ukraine. China overshadows Russia and superpower as a superpower, and both countries collaborate against gradually weakening US and its allies, its liberal allies. Europe, which had been a source of stability in the international relations since the Second World War, is now witnessing largest scale grand military operations on its soil since the fall of Nazi Germany in 1945. Secondly, the growing economic and political influence of developing regions, now termed as Global South, increasingly impacts relations among great powers. The future of the three great power relations will probably be determined by which power will be a winner of the struggles for the hearts and minds of the Global South. Meanwhile, evolving rivalries among countries in the South, like the one between India and China, will be another important element which will shape the world in the coming years. Thirdly, in the Pacific region, a nexus of interest from US, China, Europe, Africa, Middle East is now at the forefront of international politics and economics due to Asia's economic growth and increasing rivalry between US and China. In 2016, if you remember, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe of Japan, he proposed collaborative efforts towards free and open Indo-Pacific during the TICAD meeting in Kenya. By 2019, ASEAN Summit adopted AOIP, which is the abbreviation of ASEAN's outlook on the Indo-Pacific, with Japan expressing its full support. G7 countries, India, Australia, and the EU have since unveiled their Indo-Pacific cooperation strategies. Initially cautious, China seems more open to cooperation within the framework of ASEAN and China within the two countries. Given ASEAN's strategic position in the Indo-Pacific, ASEAN's external partners will inevitably continue to show increased interest in the AOIP's progress. Whether ASEAN can exercise the leadership in advancing cooperation in the AOIP's 4 pillars, maritime cooperation, connectivity, SDGs, and economic cooperation, will be crucial for achieving stability and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific region. In this rapid changing world, the partnership between ASEAN and Japan has become even more important for peace and stability in the world. Today's session revolves around the theme of collaboration between ASEAN and Japan. This topic will also be primary focus in the upcoming summit in December in commemorating the 50th anniversary of Japan-ASEAN Friendship and Cooperation. I eagerly anticipate vibrant discussion among our speaker, panelists, and the audience. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Now we'd like to have a keynote speech from Dr. Dino Pattijalal.
Good morning. My name is Dino Pattijalal from Indonesia. I want to thank Tsukuba University for inviting me to speak here, and also our good partner, GRIPS, Professor Yutaka Imura-san, Shinoda-san, Watanabe-san, and all the panelists who are here. The theme of this talk is how will ASEAN and Japan deal with a changing world order? Let me begin with this event that I saw last year when I attended the Paris Peace Forum. There was a session that was hosted and moderated by President Macron, and he was inviting leaders from the Global South, from Africa, from Latin America, from Asia, and other places. And he began with a very strong message about how there should be global solidarity in the face of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And after his speech, he was utterly surprised and indeed shocked by the response from other leaders from the Global South, which said, yes, what Russia did is wrong, but then each one of them said, what about Palestine? What about this and that? What about a lot of the contradictions that they said that the West had shown in recent years, right? I think that episode, and is available on YouTube for you to see, opened up the eyes of the French government and also many Western leaders that, look, we need to do better in engaging the Global South. And in fact, the attitude of the Global South towards the world order is quite complex, right? And I think this is a good starting point for our discussions. And indeed, in recent times, there's been a lot of discussions on how the Global South see the world order, and in particular, the West. Yeah? And like it or not, we have to be honest about this. If you look at many countries in the Global South, the perception that has been held, both among the political elite level and at the grassroots, is that they are somewhat skeptical about the world order. They don't feel that they own the global order, and sometimes they feel that the global order works to their disadvantage, rightly or wrongly. There's a very strong perception that the West, in upholding the global order, exhibits double standards, inconsistent, and with a lot of interventionist tendencies, right? So if you talk about to people on the streets in Jakarta, in Kuala Lumpur, in Manila, in the Middle East, in Africa, Latin America, you will be bound to hear these common perceptions of the Western world, notwithstanding all the good things that the Western world has contributed to the world order. So I think the good news is that this has been notified and realized by the Western world. We very much appreciate seeing Prime Minister Kishida inviting leaders of the Global South to the G7 summit. And India this year, in its chairmanship, also has actively tried to mobilize the support of the Global South in the course of its chairmanship of the G20 summit. Right? Now, as the Global South looks at the world order, there are a couple things that I want to note. It's quite different feeling than 3 or 4 decades ago. Right? When the Global South see the global order now, they see a different world and a different place for them in that world. What is definitely we're seeing is the power shifts. Yeah, the structure of global power has shifted. You know, we talk about China, the rise of China. Yes, very much true, but it's not just China who's rising. Indonesia is rising. India is rising. Brazil, Turkey, Mexico, South Africa. You know, many countries in the Global South are rising and seeing a resurgence of the economic, political, diplomatic, and strategic strength. Right? Now, this is something new to us because we did not see this in the 60s and 70s. And when you see countries experiencing rising power, what you see is their confidence rise also. And what you see is their sense of entitlement rise also, right? And what you see is these countries feel that there are more options now. You know, I was in government before, and it felt like we did not have many options at that time. Whenever we had pressures, when we were having crisis and so on, the options were limited. But now we live in a world where it's not just the Western countries who have economic power, but the non-Western countries, and they all have options that translates into greater opportunities for the global South. And I think what this means is that we are seeing not a world of non-alignment. You know, the non-aligned movement was quite strong in the foreign policies of the Global South countries, right? But now you don't see much of non-aligned movement anymore, right? But what you see is something new. What you see is countries in the Global South adopting not non-alignment, but creative alignments, right? I repeat, not non-alignment, but creative alignments where they have the opportunity, capacity, and resources to develop alignments with countries that they see would be in their interests to do so, right? So that's what's different now to us as we look at the world. There's a greater confidence among countries in the Global South, more activism. They want more seat on the table, and they want to create more space in the world, diplomatic space, economic space, and also strategic space. Now, when the problem is this: countries in the Global South think that the world order need to be changed and shifted, right? Because they said the order that was born after 1945 is no longer suited for the realities of the 21st century. Right? So they understand that, right? And they want something, something new, something reform in the world order. But when you ask them what it is that they want to reform, what would be their demand, you don't get a straight answer. There's no consensus on this. You know, you ask India, India says, "Oh, we want a seat at the UN Security Council." Okay, that's India's answer, right? You ask China, you ask different countries, you don't really get a straight answer other than complaints that the world order does not serve their needs well and needs to be reformed, right? So we are stuck with this situation whereby countries in the global south say the world order is not sufficient, but there's no consensus on what would be that new world order. And in fact, in the 70s, you have these discussions or negotiations on the new international economic order, right? With the clear format, clear forum, clear leaders, clear demands. This time, there's nothing of that kind, yeah? There's no new international economic order demands. There's no forum, there's no format, there is no specific demands, and it's unclear who the leaders of the developing countries would be that would be accepted across the global south. So that's the reality that we have now. The world order is in flux, definitely in the midst of great shifts. And I think this is a play that we're going to continue to see for some time. Right? Now, for ASEAN, obviously, we are invested in the world order. ASEAN has always called for a rules-based world order. And I do think that the Ukraine war, Russia's aggression in Ukraine, has tested that principle, because in the UN resolution, for example, 8 out of 10 ASEAN members voted in favor of that resolution, but 2 abstained. 2 ASEAN countries abstained. I think meaning that, yes, we all want a rules-based world order, but how far would we go to defend it or to stand by, to stand up for it when it is challenged? I think this is a wake-up call for ASEAN also to revisit and review what do they mean by rules-based world order and how much are they committed to it. But having said that, I think for ASEAN, the answer to preserve their interests and their security would be in the regional order. Right? Yes, the global order is important, but the one they can really control and the one that have the resources and the capacity to manipulate and to shape is the regional order of Southeast Asia. And I think this is where ASEAN has become very strategic because ASEAN now and in recent years has been able to set the terms of regional affairs in Southeast Asia. So meaning, for example, the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation. So countries that want to engage in Southeast Asia, they have to sign on to Treaty of Amity and Cooperation and play by the rules set by ASEAN. Yeah, the ASEAN Charter, for example, sets the rules of the game for ASEAN countries, guiding relationships between countries of ASEAN. The AOIP, the ASEAN Outlook on Indo-Pacific, also specifies how ASEAN wants to see the Indo-Pacific region evolve. Right? So for ASEAN, I think the realistic methodology to ensure their security, their prosperity, their stability is to focus on their region and in working among ASEAN countries and also in working with extra-regional countries, namely our dialogue partners. This is the best way for us to guarantee the construct of Southeast Asia where ASEAN would be on the driver's seat. Right? Before, obviously in the 70s or 80s, but particularly in the 70s and late 60s where ASEAN was just formed, it did not feel that ASEAN was on the driver's seat of events in Southeast Asia. We were too much responsive, responding to events rather than a shaper of events. And I think this brings us to my last point about where ASEAN and Japan fit in into this whole picture. Yeah? I think the relationship between ASEAN and Japan has been transformed significantly. ASEAN and Japan now has this comprehensive and strategic partnership, which is the highest level of engagement by ASEAN accorded to its dialogue partners. Right? I think Japan has a special place in terms of ASEAN's foreign relations. You know, every country is unique. Yeah, every country is unique. The United States is unique. China is unique. EU is unique. India is unique, and Japan also is unique in its own way. I think what is unique about Japan is that the trust between ASEAN and Japan is very high. Right? Actually, my group now is doing a survey of ASEAN attitude towards United States, China, Japan, and India. And I think it's a foregone conclusion that one of the countries that ASEAN trusts has the highest degree of trust is Japan. Yeah? The comfort level is very high, both sides, from Japan towards ASEAN and from ASEAN towards Japan. There's a credibility, there's no credibility gap. Yeah? When Japan says it has goodwill towards ASEAN, then that is what is accepted. As Japan has a long experience of cooperating in Southeast Asia, and Japan is not seen as an interventionist country. You have to understand the Southeast Asian psychology, why ASEAN was established in 1967, the Treaty of Amity in 1976. Intervention and the value of guarding against foreign interference was dominant in ASEAN's thinking, on regionalism, right? Japan was never seen in that light, right? I don't know if you realize this, but that is one of your psychological and political assets, right? You are not known to use sanctions liberally against other countries, and ASEAN countries are quite sensitive about the use of sanctions against them. Japan is seen to be a country which has good understanding of Southeast Asian affairs because it's in your interest too. It's one of the nearest regions to you. And Japan is seen as consistent. Yes, you have change of governments, change of parties in government, but Japan's attitude and priorities towards Southeast Asia, towards ASEAN, is seen as generally or relatively consistent and not so much shifts and ups and down. Yeah. So Japan does have a unique position in terms of its relationship with Southeast Asia. I think Japan's economic engagement with Southeast Asia has been underreported and underrated. Japan's ODA, credit, loans, and grants portfolio is very generous. Yeah? It's quite large relative to other countries. Japan's infrastructure development in Southeast Asia has also been very solid. Yeah? Japan, according to one source, fulfills 78% of the infrastructure projects it promised, right? 78%, that is a very high number. And Japan has the reputation of doing projects that are green, clean, and of high quality. And whatever Japan signs on paper, that is what Japan delivers. That reputation is well known throughout Southeast Asia, which is why Japan is an infrastructure partner of choice for many Southeast Asian countries. And also there's a matter on security. The MSDF, the Maritime Self-Defense Force, works well with some coast guards in ASEAN countries. It's not high-profile cooperation, but low-profile, but effective and substantive, right? And on top of that, I would like to close by saying that a key part of this ASEAN-Japan relationship must be in people-to-people. And people-to-people is something that must be re-earned and earned. There were quite a few Indonesian leaders who studied in Japan, right? And that really changed the texture of the relationship. You got to make sure that this pipeline of students and future leaders from ASEAN countries continue to study in Japan because I do think that this is by far the best investment that Japan can have in ASEAN countries, in human investments and in education and future leaders, and also vice versa. So I'm very glad that Japan and ASEAN have celebrated 50 years of very productive relationship, and I'm very sure that the next 50 years is going to be even greater story. And because of that, the regional order will be even stronger and better, and the world order will be even better and stronger. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dino. Well, now we'd like to start a panel discussion expanding on the comments from Ambassador Imura and Dr. Dino. So first of all, let me introduce you to our panelists. Dr. Dino Patijalal will continue to join us with the panel discussion. And then next to Dr. Dino, Dr. Mie Oba from Kanagawa University. And then next to Dr. Oba, Dr. Nakao Nomura from University of Tsukuba. And joining us from Singapore, Ms. Sharon Sia Lilian from ICES. She'll be joining us online. So thank you very much for joining us, and I'm looking forward to your contributions. And I just want to make this a very lively discussion, so please jump in if you have any comments or any other opinions. And also, I would like to call on the online audiences to please submit your questions in the chat box. And I will pose those questions as much as I can to the panelists during the discussion. So we'll be waiting for your questions. Okay, now first, I would like to cover the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. Now, that's a very hot topic throughout the year. And as Dr. Dino pointed out, there are different views to the invasion by Ukraine. Now, Dr. Oba, in the G7 leaders' statement on Ukraine in Japan this year, the leaders reaffirmed their commitment to stand against Russia's illegal, unjustifiable, and unprovoked war of aggression against Ukraine. Now, does the world share this view?
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. So at first, I'd like to say the thank you to all of the staff and of the Tsukuba Conference. And I'm very honored to talk here in terms of the Japan-ASEAN relationship. So in the current situations and in the about the past and about the future. And then, from my point of view, the Russian-Ukraine war makes clear Japan's position. So Japan is trying to be the order promoter. So it means that this order is an international, so liberal international order. So which has been sustained by the developed, so Western developed countries, including Japan. But the main hegemon had been the United States. And then Japan is taking a very clear stance towards the Russian-Ukraine war. First, Japan condemned Russia's invasion of Ukraine as an attempt to change the status quo, so by force, and the infringement of the Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity, and the violation of the international law and the UN Charter. So Japan is afraid that Russian invasion undermined the foundation of the liberal international order, so also Japanese government cannot accept it. And most of the Japanese nationals feel the same feeling about that. The second, Japan is imposing the various economic sanctions against Russia, including restriction on the payment and the restriction of the capital transaction to some individual and entities of Russia. So, and export banned to the designated entity to the Russia, so, and so on. The third, so Japan is providing the diplomatic and financial and humanitarian and military support to the Ukraine, and Japan is trying to enhance the support to the Ukraine. And then, so the fourth, so Japan emphasized the importance of the cooperation with the G7 members, so to deal with this war. As the chair of the G7, so Japan took an initiative to show or demonstrate the unified stance towards the Russian-Ukraine war in the recent G7 summit last May. But unfortunately, so as Dr. Dino said, so all over the world that do not share the same vision, so towards the Russian-Ukraine war. So I mean that, of course, most of the developing countries, the emerging countries, so do not support the invasion itself. But on the other hand, they want to focus on what the Western world had done so in the past. And then so they feel that this is a very double standard and so on. And then so it's a very big gap so on the perception between the Western and the rest of the world. So this is my opinion.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Oba. So there's a big gap in perception in the world. So now I'd like to ask Ms. Sia about this, the war, on how the world looks at the war in Ukraine. So what are the views towards Russia and China among ASEAN member countries? Ms. Sia?
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you very much to the organizers for inviting me. I will just go straight to the question. So as Dr. Dino said, there are different views in the Global South regarding Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So there are two camps. One that sees Russia as a provocateur for historical reasons. They want to reclaim Ukraine as part of Greater Russia. The other camp is the one that sees the US using NATO to provoke Russia into invading Ukraine. And this is the line that Russia has used as justification for its actions. So within the Global South, there will be some countries who take one line or another. So we do want to see an expression of support for international law. But for some countries, I think they see that there are certain costs to expressing the support towards international law. But, in actual fact, the international law order that has served us well, both ASEAN and Japan, cannot be cost-free. We do need to make a stand, and we do need to be prepared to pay a cost for it. And if you don't make a stand, eventually there is an erosion of the international rules-based order, and it will not be good for everyone. So the views towards Russia and China is quite varied, but I would say in general, ASEAN wants good relations with both partners, particularly with China. With Russia, some ASEAN member states perhaps will be a little bit closer to Russia due to historical or ideological linkages, whereas others will not be. So this is the situation that ASEAN is in. They want to see good relations, and yet they also need to stand up for international law. And I perhaps those members within ASEAN who feel a little closer to the Global South may feel those tensions a little bit more than the others. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Sia. So, the governments need to make a stand on this war in Ukraine. But Dr. Nomura, from the private sector point of view, for example, University of Tsukuba has received around 40 students from Ukraine. So what are some of the things that the private sector has done to help the people in Ukraine and contribute to this impact from the war?
Okay, thank you very much. As Dr. Dinopati mentioned, that the human investment is quite important, and also we should understand that there is a severe damage in the educational sectors in Ukraine by the invasion. So that we should protect these people doing the academic work in the university in the Ukraine. And I think many private sectors already recognize it, but they don't have a facility to accommodate those people. And what they do is to support those students to do academic activity in other countries. And they come to universities overseas. And I think not only my university, many universities in Japan receive the financial support or those infrastructure support or resource support for them to continue their study and research. And as a matter of fact, more than 40 students came, but many of them would like to go back also to Ukraine, but they still cannot go back. So we just support them. And we found out many issues regarding this program because we do not have any academic agreement of some university in Ukraine, but many students are from those universities. So that if they would like to return, what the academic credit from university in Japan become after they're going back? Can they graduate? Or can they continue their research using the facility in Ukraine? A lot of arrangement, but I think that many students keep working on it. Then the strong motivation for them is most of them are studying very hard to learn what is a rebuild in Japan. We experienced a lot of rebuild through the war, through the natural disaster in Japan. They know it. And that they would like to learn from our technology how to recover from our country. Because when they go back, they need to join the recovery from their country. Thank you very much.
So I guess one of the areas Japan can contribute to is rebuilding the country. So now I'd like to go on to our next section about how ASEAN and Japan can cooperate in this changing international order, as we have been talking about. We've heard about the global South already, but Dr. Oba, what exactly is the countries of the global South? Or there are a lot of opinions, but how do you look at the countries of the global South?
Yeah, so it's very hard for me to answer. So how the global South think about the current situation, because the global South itself is so diverse. From my point of view, so the global South is composed of the various countries, and however, maybe so most of them share the unacceptable feeling of the invasion itself, as well as the resentment against the Western developed countries. It's a kind of contradiction meme. So, of course, on the other hand, so they do not accept the invasion itself, but on the other hand, they cannot follow the Western developed countries, so for example, to impose a sanction as well. So I'd like to say that maybe the global South can be divided into two categories. The first one is the countries which had developed so much, so like the Euro countries and India and China. So maybe China is no more one of the global South maybe. So but anyway, so such a countries had developed so much, and then they want to increase their voices in the international scene, and they can do it. And they have many options. So including they can fund them by themselves to develop themselves. I mean, so the Thailand and maybe Indonesia has a budget to invest development of infrastructure. Of course, so Indonesia and Thailand want to get the fund outside, but on the other hand, they have a choice. they can do it by themselves because they had developed so much. So that's such a global south. So, I mean, India, Indonesia, and in a sense, and China, and South Africa. So such a global south has, can be called emerging powers. But on the other hand, so there are many countries which has not developed not so much. So in the current situation, so rather, so there are the very, they are forced to be the periphery of the globalized world, and they cannot get the chance to develop so much. And then so they, maybe so now, so Global South so contains the two such the different meanings. And then so it's very hard to say, so what does Global South think or something? But so as I said, maybe they are the common ground. They share the common ground. The first one is the non-acceptable of the invasion, and the second one is the anti-Western feeling. And maybe that they have a very deep concern about or the doubtful feeling about the existing liberal international order or the rule-based order, so led by the US and the other Western countries.
Thank you, Dr. Oba. So, Dr. Dino, as Dr. Oba just pointed out, the Global South is not just one group, but it is apparently a very different group of countries from the past international order. So what can Japan and ASEAN do to reach out to these what are called Global South countries?
Well, Japan has done its job, obviously, during the G7, inviting the leaders from the Global South. I think, showing that they're listened to, right? The countries in Global South, many of them believe that, the West doesn't listen. They do what they want, and they practice the world order at their convenience. When it serves their interests, they're strong about it, but when it doesn't, then they skip it, right? That perception is quite strong, especially at the grassroots in the main street of the Global South. And also, there are different gradations to Global South perceptions on Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Obviously, there are those who support Russia's invasion, especially among the 5 countries that voted against the resolution. But there are countries who have some dependencies on military or economic to Russia, and they don't want to complicate that, right? There are countries who don't support it, but as Dr. Mia pointed out, they are not pleased with the double standards of, and they want to point that out. But there are also countries that say, look, it's a bad thing, Russia's invasion, but it's not our war. This is Europe's war. India has been saying that, right? This is Europe's war, not the world war. And we have other things to worry about. We have jobs, we have environmental issues, we have all these things that are more priority to us. So this means if you ask different people in different regions what is the #1 security threat, they will come up with different answers. Obviously, if you ask somebody in Germany or Poland, #1 security threat now is Russia's invasion of Poland. But if you ask somebody in India, you ask somebody in Manila, you ask somebody in South Africa or Latin America, you'll get a totally different answer. And most likely the answer will not be no. The most security threat is Russia's invasion of Ukraine. You're not going to get that answer. You're going to get very different and more nuanced and complicated response to that. Yeah.
I see. So the world is getting more complicated, and it's not just one versus the other.
Yeah.
And Ms. Sia, So how should the ASEAN and Japan navigate this new, international order with such complicated, the picture landscape compared to before?
Can I, before I answer your question, can I add a little bit to the Global
Sure.
South
Yes,
discussion?
please. Mm-hmm.
Which I totally agree with Professor Oba on her views. I also want to add that, the Global South has another characteristic, which is that they are countries that have been colonized before. So they have suffered the injustices of war and the injustice of colonialism. And the Global South, or rather some of us call it the Third World, right? They have such memories of being colonized, of their natural resources being taken away from them. And that's why it adds to the kind of the debate over the hypocrisy of the First World towards the Global South. And it makes it very difficult to close that gap as long as some of these injustices are not acknowledged to the Global South. So the relationship, I would say that Japan, although you have had an image of being a former colonizer of Southeast Asia during World War II, your image has now changed. You have become a major development partner, an investor, a trade partner of ASEAN. And the relationship between the countries of ASEAN, of whom almost all of us are part of the Global South, perhaps with the exception of Singapore and Brunei being the more developed and industrialized in that sense. But the relationship is equalizing. And the very good thing about the relationship between ASEAN and Japan is that there are no major irritants, whether it is between ASEAN and Japan as a whole or in Japan's bilateral relationships with individual Southeast Asian countries. I think that is very positive. And that mutual trust has actually been built on the Fukuda doctrine of the heart-to-heart relations. And to that, I want to commend Japan, because you have clearly invested a lot into that relationship. So how should ASEAN and Japan navigate the New World Order? I think it is important to ensure that the world order that has worked for us continue to work. Resist the changes, insert certain characteristics that are open to interpretation. And we can do that by buttressing with practical cooperation. I was very encouraged to read that ASEAN-Japan law ministers have initiated a meeting after the G7 this year to begin a cooperation mechanism for communication between key legal and judicial appointment holders. I think this is a great start, and Japan can do a lot more to improve the understanding of rule of law within this region. Thank you.
Can I just add just
Sure, of
a
course.
very quick point?
Of course.
To add to Dr. Sia and Dr. Mia's point, look, there have been concerns among ASEAN countries that, look, all these countries are signing on to the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation, but are they living up to it, right? In their behavior in our region, right? That's one area where ASEAN and Japan can work on, right? To really make the architecture work better, right? Because the architecture does have flaws, right? But also in terms of the commitment of countries who have signed on to the Treaty of Amity Cooperation, which is a very sacred document to ASEAN, right? Very sacred. I mean, you look at the contents, the values, the words, mutual respect, non-intervention, no coercion, and so on. These are really important to ASEAN in a way that may not be so obviously important to, I don't know, other countries, right? But for us, it's a very sacred document. So I think ASEAN and Japan can really work together more to ensure the effective implementation of Treaty of Amity and Cooperation.
Yes. Dr. Oba, do you want to add anything to that?
I agree with Dr. Dino. So including the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation, so ASEAN has constructed the ASEAN-centered architecture to sustain the stable regional order in not only Southeast Asia but also the broader East Asia and Asia Pacific. So this is the outcome of the ASEAN effort to do that. And on the other hand, so the external powers, including Japan, China, and the US, and of course the other external power who signed the TAG and joined the ASEAN architecture, so strongly support the ASEAN-centered the architecture. This is a very the happy match. So between the ASEAN and the external powers, and then so they lead to the construction of the function of the ASEAN architecture could function so to sustain the regional order. So, but some countries behaviors, so it's out of the norms, so which stipulated in the Treaty on the Amity Cooperation, and then so this is a very problematic. But without the TAG and the other ASEAN architecture, so what happened? So in the current situation, I mean, the ASEAN architecture did function and is functioning. So we are facing the common challenges, very severe challenges. So coming from the outside, coming from the external, international environment.
So Japan can solidify and support this important ASEAN architecture.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Now, if there are questions from the online, if there are any questions, I'd like to take up the online questions. 2? Okay. Thank you very much.
すみません、作りが悪くて。
Okay, the first question. What is your take on the role of ASEAN and Japan if the issue concerns the players in the ASEAN region like Myanmar? Who would like to answer that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So unfortunately, I do not have any specific ideas to deal with the Myanmar issue because when the Myanmar issue is solved, the domestic politics, domestic situation in Myanmar need to change. So how to push or how to persuade the Myanmar leaders to change. So this is very important, but the specific method is very, hard to be made clear here. In relation to this issue, I'd like to the proposal or say how the Japanese government approach to this issue. For example, Japanese government choose the rule-based international order, rule-based, not liberal. Sometimes it's a very political wording. So of course, rule-based, it's okay. So it's very good word. So because almost every country cannot and do not oppose to the rule-based order. But on the other hand, Japanese government do not want to mention that clearly the domestic and democracy and human rights and so on. It's a very political wording. I do not criticize it, but I just want to point out the characteristics and the rule-based wording. But on the other hand, Japan tried to pursue the dual approach to the ASEAN countries. Of course, the case is Thailand. Old generations leaders want to keep the existing political regime, which is not a democratic one sometimes. old generation's leader, a leader coming from the old generation. But on the other hand, now in the many Southeast Asian countries, including Indonesia, so civil society has developed. And then and especially the younger generation feeling, so like that, so we should be the democratic country. Or they regard the human right, protection of human right as very important. So, and then, I mean, maybe the generation gaps, so in some Southeast Asian countries, but in the future, so maybe the leader will and would come from such a new generations.
New leaders.
Yes, and then now, of course, Japan want to keep the good relationship with the current administration. So, but on the other hand, Japan should see the future. So and then, I'd like the Japanese government to make the human networks. Or the channels to such a group, the younger group, which is composed of the younger generation. Yeah.
So Dr. Dino,
Yeah, maybe.
the younger generation.
Yes. Well, first, I think it's important for Japan to let ASEAN take the lead on Myanmar. And I think this has been the approach done by Japan. I remember when the coup happened and so on, and ASEAN had to take a response. And I asked the Japanese ambassador to ASEAN, what is Japan's view? And Tokyo, he said, Tokyo's response was very clear. We follow ASEAN, right? So I think that's the right approach rather than Japan being ahead of ASEAN, Japan let ASEAN lead. But secondly, on the ASEAN front, look, I think ASEAN has a lot to do to improve how it handles Myanmar, right? First, the role or the friction between Indonesia and Thailand on who to contact, how to contact, and how to coordinate has to be resolved, right? This is a sensitive issue, but on the Indonesian side, we have to accept that Thailand has more access to the junta, to Aung San Suu Kyi, and the others. And we got to be able to, work with everybody that has access. So that part between Indonesia and Thailand needs to be sorted out. And secondly, we need to improve the way the special envoy functions, because now the special envoy of ASEAN for Myanmar is in the hands of the foreign minister of Indonesia as chair of ASEAN. But look, if you want to resolve a very complex political crisis in Myanmar, or help resolve it, not resolve it, you can't have a rotating person every year, right? It's just not how peace resolution is done. You got to have somebody who's focused away from politics and has all the resources, and he or she doesn't have to worry about, hey, I won't have this job 6 months from now. It has to be a permanently appointed special envoy that can do the job. And unfortunately, that mechanism doesn't exist now. Yeah.
So, a new mechanism.
One?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Regarding the support for the Myanmar, I also would like to share one of my experience that if you check the data, maybe it's very clear that application for the university level student is increasing a lot from Myanmar this year. I'm in charge for international mission of my university, and I was really surprised that a lot of students applying from Myanmar. And that carefully, they are the current student in some university in Myanmar. And they would like to go out, and they would like to study abroad. But the big issue for them to study abroad is different from Ukraine, is that it takes a long time to get a passport. And maybe somebody control this human, going out from the country. So that I think the ASEAN architecture or some rule-based this pressure to their government to let them go freely is very important, especially if they are graduate level and they have some status in the government. Totally difficult. Sometimes they cannot get passport at all. If they are a government officer and they are doing graduate studies some university in Myanmar. And most are from the leading university in Myanmar, like a Yangon Technology University or Yangon Medical University. This is happening this year, actually.
Wow. So those students from closer to Japan are harder to get in than from Ukraine. Okay. Right. Okay, another question. Japan may be perceived in a friendly, trustworthy light, but when it comes to the political clout to get things done, what is the contribution and role Japan has with ASEAN be another Security Council?
Security what?
Security Council.
Security Council. In term regarding the specific specific issues or support.
I guess what this question is saying is that can Japan get things done in the world order among all these political row between the big powers and the multipolar world?
Yeah, it's very hard to talk, but so compared to the past, so Japan's foreign policy, so it apparently become proactive. So in the past, so the very famous scholars Kent Calder so argue that Japan is a reactive state. So it just reacts to the pressure from outside and construct its foreign policy. So, but now, so especially since the early 2010, so Japanese government and Japan so tried to demonstrate its own role as a order promoter, not order taker. So, but pointed that, so some global south countries, so I mean, so the developed global south countries like the India, China, and Indonesia are there. Such a countries also should try to be the regional order promoter, so not the order taker. So they want to increase the voices. So, and then, so maybe, so Japan and such a developed global south do not always share the regional and international order vision. And then, so I mean, so Japan's role is to, so communicate, so with the other, with such a developed global south, so to make the new sustain the fair regional order. So this is very important. So the role of Japan, and secondly, so as for the regional order, so Japan and the cooperation between the ASEAN and Japan, so it's shifting. So I mean from the only economic cooperation, so to the economic as well as the defense cooperation. So, for example, Japan provided the patrol ships so to some Southeast Asian countries, and so Japan tried to promote defense cooperation under the Vientiane Vision, so which was firstly announced in the 2016, and Vientiane Vision version 2 so was announced so in the 2019. And then so that the Vientiane Vision version 2 so is positioned in the context of the free and open Indo-Pacific. And then so this is one of the this is one of the example of Japan's behaviors to take the role of the regional order promoter, so not the taker. And then so Japan should pursue such a direction. So and then so with communication with developed global south. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Oba. And there's one more question. So, Dr. Dino, the question says, can ASEAN become like a United Nations in the future? We've talked about ASEAN. There's an architecture for ASEAN, and Japan can support that. Can can it be kind of like United Nations in the future?
Yeah. Well, we don't want to be the United Nations. We want the United Nations to do its job and to be what it is, and we're quite happy to support that. I think ASEAN wants to be ASEAN. Look, look at countries or regions around the world, and ASEAN has a lot to be proud of, because this used to be the most unstable, volatile, divided region in the world. Countries had wars in that region. Now it's a peaceful region, safe Myanmar, yeah, except for Myanmar, there's still violence going on there. But by and large, it's an ASEAN community, peaceful and full of cooperation. And you look at just next door, South Asia, that has something similar called SARC, right? And it's not functional because India and Pakistan are still having problems. We just had a dialogue with Latin America recently, my group, and somebody from Argentina pointed out that they tried to do something similar, a regional organization covering Latin America. It never worked out, right? In many other places, things are having problems in terms of fostering regionalism. So ASEAN has found the secret sauce, the secret recipe, and it has worked for us. And the challenge is whether or not it's going to be effective and still workable for the coming decades. And that's what ASEAN is trying to figure out, an ASEAN vision post-2025. But one thing, which is very important psychologically to understand, right now, ASEAN countries have no enemies. Most of them did, including Indonesia, including Malaysia, including Singapore. Singapore and Indonesia, we used to have confrontasi before, right? Vietnam, Cambodia, you name these countries, perhaps except Brunei, but they had enemies and they had wars before. And now we don't. So we're living in what is called a strategic luxury, right? Even President Marcos says Philippines wants to be friend to all and enemy to none, yeah? So you have to understand that psychology for ASEAN to understand that we don't want to lose that, right? So we would oppose Russia's invasion of Ukraine, but we don't want to be part of that war. We're not going to send troops or weapons. Even though we oppose that war. So that psychology needs to be very much understood, and we want to pass on to the next generation.
So keep it as it is. Okay, thank you. Now I'd like to go on to our next topic about food and energy security. So, and we've seen the war in Ukraine lead to shortages of food and energy around the world and price hikes. So, Ms. Sia, what are some of the problems that stem from the shortage of food and energy in developing countries? I mean, developing countries are said to have suffered the most from this issue.
Yeah, actually, the FAO has made predictions regarding the availability of food. It's actually available. The food is available, but it's not getting to the places where it's needed most. I think the biggest problem, particularly as experienced during the outbreak of the war in Ukraine, was the supply chain disruptions that took place. This is the most significant part that has choked the supply of food and energy, and in which Indonesian President Joko Widodo worked very hard. You saw last year and the way that he had made multiple attempts to speak to Russia and to also talk to Ukraine to unblock the access to the Black Sea. I think this was an issue that not only affected Indonesia, but also in our region. There was a great deal of concern, and we are very appreciative that Indonesia took the leadership in this to try to unblock that access. So I think, but going forward, I think as the war continues, we will have to begin to really work very hard to bolster the resilience of the supply chains within the region so that we are better protected from these types of shocks. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Dr. Nomura, you've been talking to your colleagues abroad. So what do the countries expect, the developing countries expect from Japan to deal with the future food and energy crisis?
Okay, there are many things to do for the possibility of the collaboration for that one. But from my field, my background is biotechnology, and what is a big difference between ASEAN and Japan is, of course, the climate is really big different, and dependence on the agriculture is very big in ASEAN. And for us, in ASEAN, there are a lot of the biomass resources not utilized well. And in Japan, we develop a lot of technology to utilize fully from our agriculture product. And many technology could be applied to those utilization of the unused biomass in the Southeast Asia. And I think maybe the government or some companies should support more on the research activity on the utilization of the unused biomass in the Southeast Asia. And a lot of technologies from Japan could be utilized. I see many professors are interested in Japan to do that one as well.
So, Dr. Dino, how should governments around the world achieve stable supply of food and energy when the next crisis comes, like the war in Ukraine or whatever?
Well, I mean, first answer is Russia has to get out of Ukraine.
Okay.
Right.
Yes.
And that will contribute a lot to food security. And I think really this issue needs to be communicated to Moscow, to President Putin. Because he doesn't meet the Western leaders, but he meets a lot of leaders from the Global South. And leaders of the Global South has to be upfront and telling President Putin, hey, your invasion is hurting us, hurting our people, hurting my political career, right? And they should have the guts to say that to President. And why not? We say it to the Americans all the time. Why can't we say it to President Putin, right? And then other thing is really doing everything to enhance food resiliency in Indonesia now. There's a special program now to improve agricultural production and food security. And I think Japan can help because Japan is ranked 6th in the Global Food Security Index. And I think you're number 1 in quality of food production, right? So there's a lot that can be shared by Japan with ASEAN countries, especially on best practices on food technology, as Dr. Nomura says, and so on. And I think this is going to be one important area of collaboration between ASEAN and Japan. I know there's already an agreement or declaration between ASEAN and Japan on food sustainability. Yeah.
Okay. So Dr. Nomura, what are the other things that Japan is already doing exactly to alleviate the energy problem around the world?
Come again, please.
Yeah. So what is Japan doing to alleviate this food shortage and energy problem around the world? Are there anything that Japan is doing to support?
So for the energy, we do a lot because we depend on the energy from the import. Then we try to produce our own energy. I think my field is biotechnology, so I think we utilize a lot of the biomass resource to become energy. And that kind of technology is, I think, applied a lot. Not really the large-scale level, but I think some research output could be utilized in many countries. For example, fuel from the algae, I think we do a lot. Then I think some companies are interested in using that for the airplane like that.
Mm-hmm. Right. So a lot of assistance can be done in the field of technology.
So I have one question to the Nomura sensei. So does the biomass technology have a negative impact on the food security? I mean, it's the resources.
Because there is always discussion like that. So
what is the current discussion about the balance between the biomass and food security?
Yes.
Sorry.
When we develop some technology to make energy from biomass, we have to be careful that if it could be a conflict between the food supply and the energy supply. And if it could be for food supply, I think we should be careful of that one. And at this moment, the people doing that research is really careful that one. When we start, about 20 years ago, we start talking about like a biodiesel or bioalcohol. raw materials of food, like rice or maize, like that.
Yes.
And I think those research, I think they try to convert the raw material from the non-edible material.
Yeah.
There are many research on that.
Yes,
one.
I understand. Thank you very much. So my knowledge is very old. So I want to refresh. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nomura. So now let's go on to the topic of climate change in Asia. So, Dr. Dino, the Western countries, especially those in Europe, are rapidly reducing CO2 emissions. But how are the situation in Asian countries different from those in Western countries? Are we doing the same thing to tackle climate change?
Well, first, the good news is that the political commitment to net zero is rising dramatically. I think most countries around the world now has submitted their NDC, nationally determined contributions, to reduce their emissions. And in ASEAN region, everyone has already a net zero target by 2050. Indonesia is 2060 or earlier, right? So at least the strategic target is there. The political commitment is there, although it can be more solid, it's still uneven at the moment. And public support or concern is growing. In Indonesia, for example, there was a survey that found the number 2 concern of young people is climate change. Number 2, yeah. Wow. Number 1 is corruption. That's not going to change, So I think the political and social adaptation is there. Now the question is in the policies, obviously. The big news now is what is called JETP. So Indonesia has been complaining, hey, Western countries, developed countries, you ask us to do our share of work to reduce emission. Where's the money? Like remember Tom Cruise said, where is the money? Where is the money? Show me the money, right? And the money has been promised now, 20 billion, I think the most ever promised to a developing country by Western consortiums, including Japan. So now the trick is, now that the money has been promised and pledged, can Indonesia, as a developing country and a large emitter, deliver the plan to decarbonize the energy sector, which means taking out the coal and putting in renewable. So it's a big test for us, but it's a good development that rich countries, developed countries say, okay, here's the money, do what you can, and show the rest of the world that we can decarbonize effectively the dirty energy that used to burden you.
So Dr. Nomura, Asia is getting money to decarbonize, but is the approach different from those of Western countries in Asia? Are there any difference in approach to tackling climate change?
Yeah, I think there's some similar, but there's some different. I think similar thing is I think what Dr. Dino said that, but the different thing is that we have more international collaboration on that one. Because I think situation for the energy is really different in each countries. Like Japan, we need a lot of oil or energy fuel from other countries, so that we spend a lot for the international collaboration for that. And we have some suppliers in Asia also. So the international collaboration for those kind of technology development is a lot in Asia, I guess.
See, Ms. Sia, so is the approach, or how is Asian countries focused on achieving a sustainable society or reducing or tackling climate change?
I think the issue of climate change is really complicated and complex. And in view of our discussions so far about the Global South, the climate change also brings to fore the whole element of climate injustice. Whatever that they have experienced, up to this point, much of Asia actually is very much still focused on the right to development. And the discussions within the climate circuit has been asking for loss and damage assistance from the West, not to mention the assistance to help achieve those mitigation targets. So this is really very real. Climate change has brought this to the fore. At the moment, in terms of public perceptions, I think that in Asia, the fight is a lot against plastics pollution. Conversations are on circular economy, ESG reporting, improving public infrastructure in cities, greening supply chains, and so on. But as Park Dino has said, governments are beginning to think more seriously about their NDCs. 4 out of 10 ASEAN countries have submitted their long-term low-emission development strategies and beginning to implement those pledges. But no one wants to do the unpopular things, right? Nobody wants to reduce fossil fuel subsidies, for instance. The IMF has told us that more than $7 trillion has been devoted to subsidies last year, and that's more than in 2015, has almost doubled. No one wants to impose carbon taxes because it's unpopular. Even right down to the individual, nobody wants to pay more for using up our carbon budget. In ASEAN, the focus is a lot on adoption of EVs, electric vehicles. We have our EV roadmap. But remember, EVs are not going to save us from climate change. EV is actually a way only for the automobile industry to continue its business of selling more vehicles without consideration, of course, to the entire life cycle of EVs, how to mine critical minerals responsibly, how to dispose of the batteries later on. The focus is also on technology like CCUS, carbon capture utilization. Again, it is not to save the environment, but to allow the traditional oil and gas to continue their business. So governments need to start looking at phasing out coal, retire the aging fleets, avoid stranded assets, look at use of carbon instruments, not just pricing or markets, but actual carbon tax to tax the emitters, and then also adopt the nature-based solutions for adaptation and to encourage sequestration of carbon. But all of these things require a great deal of coordination between stakeholders, not just government, but also the private sector, the civil society, the NGOs, and academia. And I think we have to also face up to the reality that at this point of the world's progress, we cannot expect grants and handouts anymore from the Western world, what with a war happening in their own backyard. So the developing world, the global south, has to be more creative in finding the resources to help themselves out of the climate crisis. Where in the past we did hear that, in ASEAN, we only contribute less than 10% of emissions globally. But I think governments are changing and they're starting to say we will also play our part and be responsible in tackling climate change.
Okay, so people in Asia are becoming more aware of climate change, and also the government is tackling the issue. Okay, thank you very much. So I have some questions from the audience. Number 1, if ASEAN is not moving towards a UN-like structure, how does it possibly imagine itself from the views of the Indo-Pacific, Singapore, and Japan?
To US alliance?
From the views of, so I think this question means, so if ASEAN is not aiming for a UN-like structure, then what is its ultimate goal? Dr. Dino?
Well, I think the ultimate goal is really embedded in the wording of the ASEAN Charter and Treaty of Amity and Cooperation. And basically, ASEAN wants to be a community of peaceful nations, of open and caring societies, and in open and inclusive and free Indo-Pacific open regionalism. Right? I think it's very simple, making sure that countries in ASEAN are engaged in cooperation as part of ASEAN family. But the biggest challenge now is really getting down to people among ASEAN, because ASEAN wants to be people-centered, but the majority of people living in ASEAN do not know much about ASEAN. I mean, if you ask them, what do you know about ASEAN Economic Community? I think less than 1% would know the answer, right? So at the top level, ASEAN is very strong. But at the bottom level, more people need to benefit from ASEAN. In Indonesia, for example, we have about 36 provinces, only about 1/3 actually trade with ASEAN. And the other 2/3 don't really trade with ASEAN economies, even though it's just across the borders. In Indonesia, it's hard to find ASEAN students from ASEAN countries studying in Indonesia, which is quite odd because Indonesia is the largest country in ASEAN. So people to people would be the next battleground, the next level for ASEAN to develop into a real community.
I see. Okay, thank you very much. We're, I think, running out of time, so I would like to wrap up this panel discussion by asking all of you, a final comment about the future of ASEAN and Japan and how we can, navigate this new international order. So, Dr. Dino, would you like to start?
Yeah, one of the earliest foreign policy event I remember as a kid, to be honest, brutally honest, is the anti-Japan demonstrations in the streets of Jakarta. So Japanese products were burned and destroyed by the mass in the streets. Now, compare that to today, where is that zero feeling, right? Zero. Right? There's a lot of friendship and even admiration to Japanese products and Japanese things. What I want to say is that these things change, but they have to be earned, right? They have to be earned because maintaining them sometimes is harder than creating them in the first place, right? Once you have, it's just like a marriage, right? You married with your wife now, but 20 years later, things may go stale, trust may go down, and so on, right? So never take the relationship for granted. Always work at it at the elite level. Prime Minister Fukuda was right. It has to be heart-to-heart conversation. It can't be just conversation scripted between two leaders across tables. There has to be a lot of heart-to-heart dialogue between the leaders. I remember taking part in a discussion between my former president, Yudhoyono, with Prime Minister Abe. He came to Indonesia, and the first thing, his agenda was very simple. Japan wants to expand its defense posture. Can you accept it? He came to us, and I was there as a note taker. And it was immediately agreed, right? Why? Because the trust is there, right? So maintain the trust, earn the trust, and even prolong it and solidify it for the future. I think that's the recipe.
So never stop continuing to work on trust.
Yeah, thank you very much. So when the Prime Minister Tanaka visited the Southeast Asia in January 1974, he met the very big anti-Japanese riot. So in Bangkok as well as Jakarta. Yes, this was the worst point and the worst era between the Southeast Asia and Japan. And after that, 3 years later, Fukuda Doctrine clearly said, we need to be the heart-to-heart relationship as well as the equal partners. To be the equal partners. And Japan must not be the military power. They are the 3 pillars of the Fukuda Doctrine. Since then, the Japan-ASEAN relationship has developed and has improved so much. Now, as Dr. Dino said, the trust rate toward Japan is improving, is very high. So I was so surprised to see the report of the state of the Southeast Asia, the new one. So I was so surprised. But on the other hand, we have to enter the new era. So first one is the change of the power balance between the ASEAN and Japan. So now the total GDP of the ASEAN countries reached at about 80% of the Japan GDP. So it means that the ASEAN country has developed. And of course, Japan should be the one of the developed countries, but the power balance is apparently changed. So in the 1970s, the 1980s, so Japan was a top partner in terms of the trade and the investment for Southeast Asia. So Japan's the economic presence was so big, so big in that era. But now, so ASEAN has many choices. So other than Japan's, like China and the Western countries and so on. And so considering these realities, so Japan should approach to the Southeast Asia and ASEAN countries and ASEAN. The second one is, yes, as I said, so we are shifted from the not only economic cooperation to the economic and defense, so to sustain and foster and rule-based regional order. So this is very important. Of course, Japan should be the pacifist country. So of course, so we have to avoid the surge of some kind of the misgivings about against Japan's behaviors. But on the other hand, Japan should be the regional order promoter, and to cooperate with the ASEAN country. And the third one is, yes, as I said, the dual approach. So Japan should see the future, so in the Southeast Asia. So not only looked at the current regime, the current leaders, but also the new generation, the surge of the new generation in Southeast Asia, so including the development of the civil society. So, yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Oba. Dr. Nomura?
Yeah, okay, thank you. I have two things that for the wrap-up comment. One is compared to the South Asia or Latin America, ASEAN has more regional cooperation, as Dr. Nippon said. I totally agree with that. But I talk with many people that people prioritize regional cooperation is really important. That's why the people can sustain this one. And they also join some a bit smaller organizations in charge for each section in ASEAN, and especially in the education. I joined several meetings of the organization called the SIMIO. Every education minister from each ASEAN country joined that meeting. And we do a lot of projects for the harmonization of the education in the ASEAN region. But I still see the gap between the commitment of each country. Maybe some country cannot commit much, but some really committing. Indonesia is committing a lot for that one, but sometimes I see that some countries do not commit that one. So we need to ask all the country, if it's about the regional affair, regional cooperation, I think we should prioritize more. I know they have domestic problem, but I think cooperation among ASEAN is very important. They should realize that one. And one more thing is, I do a lot of student exchange program in the university, and the University of Tsukuba is one of the very high number of the student exchange, but in ASEAN, they have their own student mobility program in the ASEAN. And Japan started joining that, and that is quite effective to nurture the future, scientists and businessmen who is familiar with ASEAN. So I think Japanese commitment to those kinds of ASEAN educational program or mobility program is quite important, I think. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Nomura. And Ms. Sia?
Thank you. I just wanted to add that a few things. One, there are two kinds of transition that is happening in the world today. The first is a transition to low carbon societies that we have talked about in the form of tackling climate change. And that entails a major overhaul in the way we generate and use and consume energy, in the way that our economies function. The second transition, which was really very much prompted by the COVID-19, is a transition to a more digital world, including the use of artificial intelligence and autonomous functions actually taking over the human role. So in this regard, I think that both Japan and ASEAN, we are still experimenting. Of course, no one has a template, the best answer or the cheat sheet to do the transition in a way that is the least disruptive to all of our lives. So I think we can work together to help each other through this transition and to learn from each other the best practices. Perhaps ASEAN learning more from Japan, because you have better resources than us. But I believe that ASEAN also has its own good practices to share. And the second point is that every year in my center, we do a survey called the State of Southeast Asia, and we always ask this question to our respondents. How confident are you that Japan can do the right things? And every year, Japan is tops. We have great confidence in you to contribute to global peace, security, prosperity, and governance. And when we ask them why, they say, oh, because Japan is a champion of international law. This speaks a lot to Japan. The second reason is because they view Japan having a great amount of political will and resources to provide that leadership. So I think there's a lot there for us to chew on about Japan's role. In a separate climate survey that we do, Japan is actually the country most looked up to for assistance in sharing climate expertise and know-how by at least a quarter of the respondents. And when asked which country can provide more assistance to bolster agricultural climate resilience, because we earlier talked about food security, again, Japan was the second most reliable. Who is the most reliable? The region feels that we ourselves, neighbors, must help each other. So they look to the immediate neighborhood, but outside of the immediate neighborhood, Japan is the most reliable for that. So in all of this, I think there's a great deal of trust. The other panelists have talked about it, but I want to also suggest that, we should not erode this trust. We should continue to build upon the trust that already exists between us, which is why I know that Japan, in elevating the relationship with ASEAN, is thinking about co-creation opportunities between us. I think this is a very good strategy for us to work to. And I believe that ASEAN can also be an equal partner in all of this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. So I think we had a great discussion and a lot of wonderful inputs about ASEAN and Japan and how we could navigate this changing international order. Thank you very much. Everyone, please give a great applause to our panelists for their magnificent insights. Thank you very much.